Okay, so I don't know if you were watching the news, but recently Donald Trump had to be moved briefly out of the office. He had to be escorted from a briefing room after a shooting near the White House, and so it raised concerns about, the safety of him during the climate of what is going on. And so, two, I listened a little bit of his speech, and they said that there was sort of like a breaching. And this breaching, I guess, that happened had something to do maybe with the shooting. So it's in Yahoo, and I've seen various articles about it because some people had been mentioning that they had heard that somebody had attempted to do a shooting. So I don't know all the details until I read this. So I'm reading this. This is new to me, just like it is to you. So it says in Washington, out of Washington, that President Trump dramatically cut short a news conference in the White House press briefing room on Monday evening after he had later described as what is a shooting outside of the building. And so Trump was initially taken to the Secret Service from the briefing room podium. And so Trump was initially taken to a Secret Service room podium from the briefing room podium. So he returned roughly 10 minutes later and then provided an explanation to the reporters. So there are no details that we found out, and it was outside of the White House, he said, and somebody was taken to the hospital. It seemed that the shooting was done by a law enforcement officer, and it was a suspect who was shot. So the president said that he was taken to the Oval Office. And so he noted that this on Fox News, so John Roberts reports hearing two shots fired outside of this building near the White House. And so the White House official who was in the building, or near the White House building is where it took place. So he told Yahoo News that they heard the shots, though the cause was unclear of why. So it sounded like a shooting outside of the building, and the official said in a text message, so they all get all this information, and so they were, protecting, I guess, the president to make sure that he was escorted to a safer environment. So Trump was interrupted as he seemed to be delivering prepared remarks, calling it mail-in voting and the disaster, and trumpeting the recent stock market gains. And he was about 5 minutes into the news conference when he was called away from the podium by staffers. And so this is what the scene sort of looked like. And so it says a man who had appeared to be a Secret Service agent then whispered into the president's ear that he was ushering him into a room from the room. And when Trump returned, he provided some information about the incident. So there was a shooting. It was law enforcement who shot someone. Seems to be a suspect. And the suspect is now on the way to the hospital, Trump said. So there was nobody else that was injured. The president said that he believed the suspect was armed and had been shot by the Secret Service agent outside the fence surrounding. So I remember hearing him saying something about a breach. And so apparently, when there's a breach, it's like somebody trying to cross over to get into the White House, or they're trying to get over a fence. And I guess there must be some kind of fencing or something around that area. And so nobody can just walk in, willy-nilly. They can't just walk in unannounced, or, not having the proper, I guess, invite to be able to go further past the fence. So I guess you have to be somebody that is there for a purpose, and you have to be vetted probably before you go in there because of this nature of the situation. But I would believe, so that's why there's so many security and Secret Service agents around there. And so somebody probably tried to breach the situation. Being at the climate that we're under, COVID-19, a lot of people being evicted, a lot of people losing jobs, a high unemployment rate, a lot of sickness going around, people up in the air about whether to take their kids to school. Some people can't take their kids to school because it's too unsafe. Some schools are open and some schools aren't. Some schools that had opened, the kids ended up contracting the disease. Some staff have died. So this is not a great time right now. So everything has to be, accounted for. So he says, going back to the article, that the Secret Service will be releasing further information about the shooting outside the building that he was in. So the White House and the Secret Service did not immediately respond for the request of comment. So the park across the White House has been a hotbed of protest activity in recent weeks. So this kind of draws into what could have possibly happened. So Trump indicated that he was not aware of whether the suspect had said anything indicating motive or whether it was a political incident. Okay, so it might not have been anything to do with me, he said, but it might have been something else. So the president also praised the Secret Service for their response in the situation. I'm sure it had to do with him, the nature of what's going on. Not a lot of people are happy. The stimulus talks, they didn't mention nothing about a $1,200 check coming. A lot of people are upset. They, recently, Governor Gavin Newsom in Los Angeles, he's the governor, he basically mentioned in his briefing that we might have to give out vouchers for hotels. Okay, so brace yourself, guys. They are about to start pulling the net. And so they've already started by pulling the net of the unemployment insurance. They scaled it from $600 to $100, and now they're talking about $400. So they're trying to bump it up just a little bit. And somebody made mention, this is somebody I know, they said that they probably won't send any $1,200 checks. And if they do, they won't send them until they've actually lifted the moratoriums, and they'll think that'll quell over the anger. I said I could see that happening, but I don't know if it would, because they hadn't come up with a number that they are going to send $1,200. They didn't come up with any agreement, so he just went ahead and did these executive orders. One was having to do with extending student loan interest payments, that you wouldn't have to make the payments for the end of the year. You wouldn't be charged interest. And then there was one eviction notice that wasn't mentioned really that much at all. Just said that he would extend it, and it didn't say the end of the year either. It just said, it's a month-to-month basis. I believe it's going to get lifted pretty soon. The other thing was the unemployment insurance, possibly bumping it up to $400 from where it was $600 to $400. So they scale it down some. So after that, and then tax holiday, So that was the only thing I heard. I don't know if you heard that. That's what I heard. But so it is crazy. I'm sure that that shooting and the breaching of the fence, it's happened before, where there's been a lot of protest against the things that have been going on lately, and so I'm sure it has some type of relation to what's going on in the White House. And so, having said that, I'm just wondering, did you all hear about this shooting? But anyway, the other thing I was going to mention, Chicago has a lot of civil unrest going on right now. 100 were arrested, 13 officers were injured at Chicago crowds clash with police out there. So apparently there was an involved shooting. So I believe I heard somebody, they were making a video about it, and I believe there might have been a shooting of another individual. And so Police in Chicago said 100 people were arrested and 13 officers were injured after hundreds smashed windows, stole from the store, and clashed with police early Monday in Chicago's Magnificent Mile shopping district and other parts of the city downtown. So about 400 officers were dispatched. So that's a lot of police out there into Chicago's downtown area after seeing posts on social media encouraging a caravan of cars to engage in looting. So the Chicago Police Department um, Superintendent David Brown said at a news conference on Monday at one point shots were fired at the police, so they were shooting at the officers, and then they had returned gunfire, so no officers were wounded by the gunfire. But Brown said that the security guard and a civilian were hospitalized in critical condition after being shot. So Brown said the social media post appeared to have been prompted by an incident earlier in the day when the police officers wounded a 20-year-old man with a long criminal history who shot at them. So a Facebook video that later circulated falsely claiming the police had shot and killed a 15-year-old boy is what it was touted. And so this confusion, I guess, started all of this. So this was not an organized protest either. So rather, this was an incident of pure criminality, Brown said. So this was an act of violence against the police officers and against the city. And so along with the Magnificent Mile, people were seen going in and out of stores carrying shopping bags full of merchandise, also running up and down the streets and out of the bank that had its windows smashed. And Chicago Tribune reported as the crowd grew, vehicles dropped off more people in the area. And so this is the scene part of it, what was happening there. So one of the officers were seen slammed against the building and a rock was thrown at a police vehicle. Newspaper said. So police worked early Monday and dispersed the crowd. So Brown said that the heavily police presence is expected in the downtown area, and a special team of investigators are examine hours of footage of the Sunday night pledge to pursue the offenders to the fullest extent of the law. So anybody that they see that they can facially recognize are probably going to be subject to criminal penalties. So it includes looting, disorderly conduct, battery against police officers. So Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot called the incident abject criminal behavior. So this is not legitimate, a First Amendment protected speech. And so these were not poor people engaged in petty theft to feed themselves and an entire family. She said this was straight up felony criminal conduct. So Lightfoot said that the city had activated a neighborhood protection program that will be in place for the foreseeable days until we know our neighborhoods are safe. So travel restrictions in and out of downtown are imposed after the incident and eased later in the day, but were to be in place again at 8 p.m. Monday until 6 a.m. Tuesday. So Lightfoot said that she had talked early Monday with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and they agreed that there was no need to call in the National Guard. So they didn't want to do that and add insult to injury, make things worse, ignite it even more. So she also sent a clear message to President Donald Trump, that his intervention was not welcome. So Trump has criticized the city's handling of increased levels of gun violence, which resulted in more homicides in July than any month in the decades. And last month, he sent federal agents to Chicago in what was called the Anti-Crime Initiative. And so, no, we do not need federal troops in Chicago, period. Full stop. Lightweight says, Lightfoot said lightweight. So I'm sure that the president will have his way with the incident, but I'm calling upon him to do things that we need to do. So we need common sense and gun control. And so Brown suggested that lenient treatment of in Chicago to those engaged in criminal activity during the protests that followed the George Floyd police killings in Minneapolis may have emboldened the looters and vandals on Monday morning. And so Lightfoot was also critical in the limited precautions by Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx, who defended herself, saying that those cases are coming to court now. Videos of vandalism showed large groups of people ransacking stores and loading merchandise into vehicles, pulling cash registers and even teller machines out of the shops. So Brown said the unrest, which began shortly after midnight, had sparked by the shooting in the city's south side hours earlier, and officers responded to a report of a man with a gun. He was 20 years old, a suspect that fled and pointed a weapon at a police officer. The officer returned fire and struck the suspect, and so Brown said, is it expected to survive? So the gun was recovered, and the suspect was taken to the hospital for treatment, and 3 officers involved were also taken to the hospital for observation, according to the statement from police. So after the shooting, the crowd gathered on the south side. He said, so tempers flared, fueled by misfortune. As the afternoon, it had turned into the evening, and so more than an hour after the shooting, police witness said that the crowd faced off with the police, and so it got violent after someone had reportedly told police people that the police had shot and wounded a child. And so the crowd eventually dispersed. So elsewhere this weekend, Portland riot, Denver, D.C. shootings. So Portland riot was again declared. So it's still rioting in Portland. So just like Chicago, there's things happening in Portland. So I just thought you guys should know that that's not going to be the only place that you're going to hear this happening, especially when they start lifting these moratoriums in these larger cities. And I'm just letting you know what time it is. So when the protesters marched to the police union building, blocked a road, and set dumpsters on fire, as the officers continued to try to quell the nightly unrest in Oregon's largest city, the protest was broken up almost as soon as it had formed outside Portland Police Association building. So the same building where the protesters were dispersed after the fire was started inside the union offices the night before. Demonstrators had marched to the building from a nearby park. The road was blocked with the fencing and the flames and seen rising from the dumpsters in the middle of the street, and the police began forcing the crowd of a couple hundred away from the building while the demonstrators were being dispersed. Commercial-grade fireworks were thrown at officers, injuring 2 police officers, that the police had said, and so injuring two police had said. So the department released photos of the officers that were injured, including a photo of a face covering up partially melted from the fireworks. And so the officers retreated at the scene. So there were officers that were injured. And so this right here, you can see what looks like is the wall of moms protest marching during the Black Lives Matter protest in Portland. This was July 29, 2020. And so this looked like it was a little more organized. So in Colorado, 10 people were injured Sunday. This is in Colorado now, after a gunman apparently opened fire on a family gathering in a small park south of downtown Denver. So Denver police asked the public's help in identifying this shooter. Investigators said that it appeared that the drive-by shooting was unconnected to the family gathering and occurred shortly after 5 p.m. So this is something that is another incident. So none of the victims appear to have suffered life-threatening injuries, police said. And so in Washington, D.C., a dispute erupted into gunfire during a large outdoor party. So all the gun violence, all the fighting, all this stuff is getting heightened, around about this time of what's going on. You see, there's the COVID, people are unemployed, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's people in the hospital. Some people have died. They've lost their loved ones. So this is not uncommon for these things to be happening. It's like a domino effect, And so now we have these moratoriums that are lifting in different various places, and they haven't come to the big cities yet. But when they do, watch out. Just letting you know. So in Washington, D.C., this dispute erupted into gunfire during a large outdoor party early Sunday, left one person dead and 20 others were injured, including an off-duty officer struggling for her life, according to police. So Christopher Brown, 17-year-old, died in the shooting that occurred after midnight in the Southeast Side neighborhood where people had gathered for music and food. Peter Newsham, the chief of Metropolitan Police, told reporters about this. So there was some kind of dispute. Newsham said multiple weapons were produced during this incident. So police said at least 3 shooters may have been involved in this, though no arrests were immediately announced. Newsham said that the motive of the shooting wasn't clear. And so that's the article. So this is not uncommon to have all of this chaos unraveling everywhere. It's like in different parts of the country, of the U.S. You have all these different incidences that are happening, all resulting in the end of violent end. So now I just want to mention that these moratoriums, you think this is something right here, what you're seeing? When they start lifting these moratoriums in these big cities, Governor Gavin Newsom was saying we might have to put out, some, clinics, moratorium clinics where we have a group of lawyers so they can, and they are, this is how they're going to have to approach it. They're going to have to set up clinics, eviction clinics, where they're going to have to help each person case by case because everybody's financial situation isn't the same. Some people got laid off and they had lower pay, or either their job quit and they're no longer, and they couldn't pay their rent. Then you got people who, before the pandemic, maybe they weren't paying their rent and they already had evictions, and then the eviction moratorium came, and the pandemic came, and it halted their eviction. So that's a different situation. And then on top of them having an eviction before the pandemic, they just kind of sat there and didn't pay any additional rent. They already were behind. And they're even more behind. And so some people were newly behind, because of the pandemic, and others had already been behind. So everybody's situation is different. Maybe some people went to work, they were working, they got sick, they went back to work and they got sick and they lost their job and they can't go back to work. Now they're behind, they're starting to get behind in their rent. And so everybody's circumstance might be different. So they're gonna have to have like clinics set up for those individuals so they can talk to them directly. Maybe have lawyers in there that'll help out, for maybe free of charge or maybe for a low fee. And if you got that many people that need help, you're gonna make money either way, or you're gonna be doing a good service for the community. You might even have lawyers, they may help out pro bono. They may not even really charge because they're doing a service for the community. You're probably going to have also housing advocates, people that might have temporary shelter or temporary housing vouchers so that people can stay in hotels or lodging areas until they figure out what they're going to do if they're newly evicted and they're put out of their homes and they have families, and they might even have certain places designated just for that event. And so I believe this is what they're getting prepared to do, because they know these bigger cities have a lot more people in it, and this is what you're going to see if you don't find some way to get this stuff organized so that people won't feel like they're going to be totally in the street. Now, some people probably will end up going with like relatives. They might stay with relatives. They might stay with friends. They may have a little extra money or whatever, and they put themselves up in a hotel or something. So everybody's situation is entirely, different, independent of one another. And so however these things work out, they might even have like programs where they give away, room vouchers and what have you. And then they'll probably want um, public assistance to step in and give their expertise on what temporary housing facilities they have available in the city of Los Angeles. And they'll probably have a list that they'll compile just so that people will be able to have somewhere to go, so they won't just leave people out in the cold. And that's not to say that you won't have anger, because now you have people who are displaced because of the pandemic. And so that presents a whole nother issue. And so we see this happening here, and this was just a misunderstanding right here. But think of real anger because you lost your job. You don't get that much unemployment anymore. It's about to run out, and you're not really going to get a stimulus check. It doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon. And you really don't know where you're going to live. If they lift this moratorium, you got to know where you're going to be able to lay your head. And if you have little ones, what are you going to do? So these are the things I think people are going to be very upset about. So this right here, all this anger, all this stuff you're starting to see it brewing. It's in various places for various different things, but I believe it's all connected. But anyway, having said that, I'm going to let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening. Once again, stay safe. This is what I fear right here. People that just, they hear one thing and they take it to a whole nother level. But we all know that, a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are going to be displaced. That right there alone, the way they're handling this COVID thing. And then recently we found out there's a glitch with the data and the numbers, so it might be even larger than 5 million. That upsets a lot of people. So just knowing that alone right there is enough to make people really angry. And now you're hearing that there's a possible shooting that was close by the building at the White House, where Donald Trump was trying to hold a press briefing. So having said that, I'm going to let this video go. I think more stuff's going to happen and more to come. And it's not going to be pretty. I don't see any good ending with any of this. The only ending that I see that can actually make things better is if they come up with a vaccine and they actually come up with something that's in mass production, that they start implementing and they start giving a date, or they start at least, making people feel more comforted that they can get control of this. Because I feel like this is the main driver that has caused the economic fall, is this COVID, this pandemic. I mean, if we didn't have this pandemic, I think even with all of what's going on here, the pandemic was the cause of people having to close down their businesses. They had to make these orders to have people to stay home. A lot of people lost jobs. If we didn't have any of that, you wouldn't see things going the way they are right now. And so a lot of that is just the main driver of what is creating all this chaos and where this whole thing originated from. It's sad. So it has really, impacted the U.S. in a big, big way, that it has caused so much chaos. But anyway, having said that, I'm going to let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for listening. Out. Stay safe.